Hello to those who are joining us. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes before we begin and allow enough time for everyone who is planning to join to be able to hop on and get connected to the meeting.
What do you think, Angela? Do you want to give it one more minute before we start?
Yeah, maybe one more minute. Want to respect the time of the folks who are here on time. So maybe we have one more minute or so. Well, shall we go ahead and get started?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is the scoping meeting for the Mary Avenue Overcrossing for the environmental impact report. And I'd like to start off with introductions. And right now I'm going to turn it over to Angela Obeso, City of Sunnyvale.
Thank you, Alex. Like Alex said, I'm Angela Obeso. I'm with the City of Sunnyvale, and I'm the city's project manager for the Mary Avenue Overcrossing EIR. Tonight, we're here to talk about the EIR scoping. So we'll give you, a general understanding of the project, what alternatives the EIR will be studying, what types of things it'll be studying. And the point tonight really is to get your feedback on the scope of the EIR itself. And Alex will go into more detail about that. But just a quick understanding of what the project is, a brief understanding, is we are proposing to extend Mary Avenue over on the northern end to go up and over US 101 and State Route 237, as well as over the Moffett Park light rail station, and then connect over into the Moffett Park area. So Alex will show some examples of the alternatives we're looking at and go into some more detail about that. Alex, do you want to bring up the presentation?
Sure. Actually, before that, Andrew, I just want to do a couple
Oh,
of
just do a quick one.
introductions on my side.
Okay.
My name is Alex Jewell. I'm with Kimley Horn. Our firm has been hired by the city to prepare the environmental impact report for the project. I'm joined tonight by my colleagues Jordan King and Addie Seedoff. And right now, Jordan. Oh, and I do want to mention before we go any further that this presentation is being recorded. And for the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Jordan to do a overview of the Zoom controls.
Yeah, thank you. So my role this evening is to kind of provide support on the back end. So if you have a question or a comment that you'd like to present, there'll be a time for that at the end of the presentation. In the meantime, at the bottom of your screen, assuming you're on a computer, it will look a little different if you're using a phone or an iPad or tablet of some kind. But you've got a couple of different options. There's a Q&A feature where you can type in a question. If you type a question in there during the question and answer part, we will address it to our panelists and they will be able to respond. Or we can respond via text. If you'd rather verbalize your comment or question, you can use the raise hand feature, and that will give me an indication that you want to speak, and I will call on you and unmute you, and you'll be able to ask that question, and then we'll put you back on mute. So if you have more than one question, you'll have to raise your hand again, just to be aware of that. And that's kind of where we're at for that. If you come up with a question throughout the presentation and you don't want to wait or you're afraid you're going to forget it, which I sometimes do, feel free to type it into the question and answer chat at any time. And then if it's appropriate to answer it during the presentation, we will. If not, we'll hold on to it so that it's still at the end, but that your question doesn't get forgotten.
Yeah, great, thank you, Jordan. And we're going to bring this slide up again at the end of the presentation to refresh these attendee controls again. So at this point in the presentation, I'm going to go over a presentation overview. As the panelists, we're going to turn our cameras off so you can focus on the presentation and not be distracted by us. And then at the end, when the Q&A starts, we will turn our cameras back on. And can you see, Jordan, can you see the presentation? Am I sharing the screen? No.
Not yet.
Okay.
We are learning about you, Alex, that you haven't filled out your timesheet for today. So.
I'm sharing the wrong screen. This is going well. Okay.
Hey, this is our new normal, right? We get to figure out how to present and do it from home with different technology than we were used to doing for a lot of years. So you are just fine.
Okay, is that still showing now?
We've still got your same screen.
Okay.
Yeah. Aha. There we go.
I'm very sorry about that, everyone. It worked great in practice. I'm not sure what happened here. All right. Okay. Thank you, everybody, again for joining. Sorry about that hiccup there. Here's an overview of our presentation outline. First, we're going to talk about California Environmental Quality Act. There's an overview of what that is. We'll discuss the purpose of tonight's scoping meeting, talk about the project itself. We'll discuss the environmental issues that will be analyzed as part of the environmental impact report. I'll talk about the proposed project schedule, and then contact information and how to make an effective comment as part of this NOP process. All right, so here's the California Environmental Quality Act. It most commonly is referred to by its acronym CEQA. And really, CEQA has 4 basic principles that guide all of the components of it and requirements that go along with preparing an environmental document. And first and foremost, CEQA requires that the environmental documents inform government decision makers and the public of what the project is and what the potential impacts associated with the project might be. So it is first and foremost an informational document. CEQA also requires environmental documents to identify ways that environmental impacts associated with a project can be reduced or avoided. If those impacts can be prevented by requiring changes in the project design, alternative projects, alternative locations, or mitigation measures, those are required to be discussed in the environmental document as well. And then lastly, to disclose to the public why a project was approved if the project involves significant impact. So sometimes there's projects where the impacts can't be reduced to less than significant through changes, alternatives, or mitigation measures. And so the decision makers are required to make specific findings that discuss why they're approving the project if it has significant environmental impacts. So tonight's scoping meeting is born out of those fundamental principles in terms of disclosing and making this an informational document. So a scoping meeting is where we present to the public, we present what the project is and notify that an environmental impact report is being prepared, and we ask and solicit guidance from the public and other public agencies to comment on what environmental issues should be discussed in the EIR. So the scoping is really, scoping out those environmental issues that should be discussed in the EIR. As part of this process, there is a 30-day public review period, a public comment period. This public comments period started on October 8th and will extend until November 8th of next month. So here's an aerial photo showing the general alignment of the project. As Angela discussed in the opening of the presentation, it's going to extend north from the existing northern terminus of Mary Avenue at the Almanor Avenue intersection. It'll go extend up over US Highway 101 and State Route 37 and into the Moffett Park specific plan area, where it will come down and tie into the existing intersection at 11th Avenue and Discovery Way. So north of the freeway, this is the southwest corner of the Moffett Park specific plan area. This is the Moffett Federal Airfield here. This is the Sunnyvale Municipal Golf Course here. And of course, this is the Matilda Avenue interchange with US 101 that extends up here. And here's the Matilda interchange with Highway 237. So the concept of doing an extension over or extending Mary Avenue north over the freeways has been discussed in Sunnyvale plans, in the general plan since the 1970s, in the land use and transportation element of the general plan, most recently was included in the 2017 update of that element. It's been discussed in various specific plans around Moffett Park and Perry Park over in the last 2 decades as well. And then it had the city has been collecting transportation impact fees to support the construction of this extension since 2005. So the concept of extending Mary Avenue in this manner has been contemplated by the city for a long time. We'll get into the actual project and discuss more specifically what the project is here. And then, so I'll go through and talk about the different options and alternatives of the project. I have cross sections for each of these, so I'll generally describe them here, and then I'll walk you through each of the cross sections, which is just a rendering and showing what the different alternatives look like. So we have a proposed project, which is going to be, the overcrossing will consist of two travel lanes one in each direction, restricted to high occupancy vehicles. This would also include protected bike facilities and sidewalks. Alternative one, so that's the project, and that's the what we'll be analyzing the EIR, but the EIR will also be analyzing 4 alternatives in equal detail. And the purpose of that is to provide the city council with options in terms of, so they can assess, what the environmental impacts are going to be associated with the project and the alternatives, and ultimately make a decision what they feel would be best for the city. So we have the project, which is 2 lanes, 1 direction, 2 lanes in each, 2 lanes, 1 lane in each direction, restricted to high occupancy vehicles. Alternative 1 would be 4 auto travel lanes. So that would be 2 lanes in each direction. And there would be no restrictions, any open to all cars. Also includes bike facilities and sidewalks. Alternative 2 includes 2 auto travel lanes, again, 1 in each direction, no restrictions on the type of cars that can travel, bike facilities and sidewalks. Alternative 3 would be limited to a pedestrian and bicycle crossing only. So you would still have an overcrossing, same alignment, but no automobiles would be allowed. It would only be bike and pedestrians. And then alternative 4 would be no project. It would remain as it is today, and the city council would remove any future plans to include an overcrossing. So there would be no overcrossing now or in the future. Before I get into the cross sections, we've talked about protected bike lanes, separated bike lanes, or cycle tracks. They're all kind of used interchangeably in this presentation. And if you're not familiar with them, I wanted to discuss them here to give you an idea what we're talking about. This is a rendering of a protected bike lane. You can see that there's a physical separation from the lanes of travel from the cars, and then you have bike lanes, right next to each other, as opposed to other bike lanes where you have one bike lane on one side of the street going with the flow of traffic, and then you have a bike lane on the other side of the street going with the flow of traffic. For these type of cycle tracks or bike lanes, they would be together on the same side of the street. And this slide is a picture of one that's been installed. So these are just examples of what that is. So here's a cross section. This is showing the proposed project. You can see here there's 2 travel lanes and 1 going each direction. These are restricted only to high occupancy vehicles. You have the cycle track right here on the right side of the street, and then you have sidewalks for pedestrians on either side of the street. This is alternative 1, and so this includes 4 lanes for cars, 2 lanes in each direction. Again, this one has no restrictions for the type of cars that can use. Any automobile can use the overcrossing. It has a cycle track and sidewalks on each side. Alternative 2, very similar to alternative 1, except it's reduced down to two lanes. 1 travel lane in each direction, no restrictions on the type of car that can be used. This is alternative 3, the bike and pedestrian overcrossing. So you can see it's limited to a cycle track on one side and pedestrian sidewalk on the other side. And then alternative 4 would be no project would be developed. The existing conditions would be remain, and the city council would take action to remove any future plans for a Mary Avenue overcrossing from the general plan. So as part of the environmental impact report that will be prepared for the project, these are the environmental issue areas that we have identified that will be discussed in the environmental document. So there are, I think it's 16 different issue areas here that we'll be looking at, and including providing an analysis in the environmental document. As part of that, we'll be preparing technical studies to support the analysis for some of those areas in the previous slide. Technical studies are reports that are prepared specific to an issue area, and they're prepared by technical specialists in the field, and often involve field work that's involved in preparing those technical studies. For traffic, I wanted to specifically mention the study intersections that will be evaluated. There's 25 different intersections that are going to be evaluated. It's a little bit hard to read at this scale, but each of these red squares that's shown here is an intersection that will be evaluated as part of the transportation analysis. And so that includes all the major intersections on Mary Avenue, from beginning up north at the Almanor intersection and all the way down to Homestead. And then on the east side, we have starting from Homestead up Sunnyvale, Saratoga, and then beginning at El Camino Real up Matilda in here. Right here, you can see the inset. So we'll also be looking at the intersections at the interchange for Matilda, US Highway 101, and Matilda and State Route 237, as well as a few intersections within the Moffett Park specific plan area. This is our proposed schedule. So we're here on the far left. Our notice preparation period here in October. So again, that extends from October 8th to November 8th. We have our public scoping meeting here tonight. So from this point forward, we'll be doing the environmental analysis. We'll be preparing the technical studies that I just discussed as well, and then the other issue areas that we're going to be evaluating in the EIR. So we'll be preparing that, and then as part of that, that'll all be consolidated into one environmental impact report document, and then it'll go to the city for various reviews and comment. And we are hoping that we will have a draft EIR out for public review sometime next, late spring, early summer. Anticipating getting the project to the Planning Commission for their review and recommendation in October of next year. It's about a year from now, and then going to City Council at the end of 2022. Assuming that the City Council approves or selects one of the build alternatives, the proposed project, then the city would begin more detailed final engineering of the project in 2023. In terms of public opportunity to comment, you have the 30-day period right now to provide comments. When the draft EIR goes out for public review, that'll be a 45-day public review comment. And then specifically, there'll be opportunities to comment at the Planning Commission and City Council hearings. And if you and really at any time, if you just want to generally comment on the project, you always have that option to reach out to city officials for that. So I wanted to provide a few tips for making helpful NOP comments. Really, as part of the NOP process, we do not focus on the merits of the project. There's opportunities for that in the future, the draft EIR and the City Council and Planning Commission hearings. Right now, we're just focused on the environmental issues and what the scope of the environmental analysis should be. So comments are most helpful when they identify significant environmental issues associated with the project. If you have ideas for reasonable alternatives that would reduce or avoid impacts, or if you have comments on mitigation measures that would be effective in reducing or avoiding environmental impacts. So at this point in the process, those are the issues that we're focused on. And when you provide comments along those lines, that's what's most helpful to city staff at this point. Providing input on the NOP. You can submit your comments to Angela. You can write comments in at the address there. You can also email comments to Angela at her email address provided there. We can also take comments tonight as part of this meeting, but I always do recommend providing written comments. One, because they become part of the written or become part of the record, and they when at the end of the process, when the final EIR is presented to the decision makers, all of the written comments received as part of the NOP and on the draft EIR, they are included in those documents, and they are there for the decision makers to review. You can also go to the city's, to follow the project rather, you can go to the city's website, and if you search for Mary Avenue Overcrossing, you will come to the city's webpage that they've dedicated to this project. You can learn more about the project, and you also have the option to stay informed by subscribing to the city's mailing list. And if you can see here, this is a screenshot of the city's webpage, and right generally about the middle of the page, they have a link there that says subscribe to stay informed. You can click that link and you fill out an email address, and then you will be subscribed. You will receive any notifications of future public meetings, other developments of the project, and then when the project gets to hearing, you will be notified of any upcoming public hearings. So that concludes our presentation. And just as a reminder here, here's the controls. I'll leave this slide up, but thank you for your attendance tonight. And myself and Angela will be available to answer any questions you may have. Okay. Well, if you're considering, what might be a good question to have, or what might be something you could talk about, we have some discussion questions here, that might help prompt some conversation. Can you think of any environmental issues you'd like to see addressed in the EIR? Do you have any environmental concerns associated with the specific option or alternative that we've mentioned tonight? And if so, which option would that be? What are the environmental issues? And then lastly, can you think of any groups or agencies that we should consult our contact in conjunction with the process in the preparation of this EIR.
So we do have a question. It is from Diana. And the question is, how much money is in the fee account and what will happen to the money if the project is scrapped?
Yeah.
I think I can take a first crack at that. And Alex, if you have anything you want to add, that's a good question. And I don't have that number with me tonight. I can certainly find out and get back to you if you're interested. But as part of, so if the no project alternative does get selected by City Council at the end of the EIR, we will then have a series of questions we need to answer, including what happens to the TIF funds, the transportation impact fee monies. Also, you know, the effort of removing it from the general plan. What does that look like? How do we move forward with that? So those are all questions that we know we need to answer, but are not specifically going to get addressed with this EIR project. So we're going to go through the process, and all of the build alternatives will be equally analyzed. All of the environmental factors that Alex shared with you tonight will be, you know, apples to apples, so that we can give the community an informed set of information to help determine if any of the builds are the way we want to go. Then at the end of that, if we go with no build, if council decides that's the way to go, then we'll address those, and there'll be, I'm sure there'll be a series of public meetings around that as well. So thank you. Good question. I see we give another 5. Oh, I see maybe another question.
Yeah, the question is, the traffic will funnel into many more streets than just Mary and Matilda. Will you be studying other streets?
Yeah, so we're going to be discussing that, and the way that the traffic analysis works is that, you know, the intersections are intended to capture the traffic movements to other streets that connect with Mary and Matilda. So while the intersection study don't cover other streets, the traffic movements, you know, Mary and Matilda are considered the main thoroughfares that will be affected, and so the movements. So each intersection that's studied, it'll look at what are the turning movements from Mary Avenue onto those other streets, and that'll be included as part of the analysis. Looks like we have another question here. Question asks, will you be changing the striping on Mary from 2 lanes to 4 lanes? And I believe it's the northern end of Mary Avenue. Is it 4 lanes, Angela? I believe it is.
I believe it is. I'm verifying right now. But the intention is that the lane configuration, and Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, but the alternatives that are being studied and the project that's being studied as the EIR, those lane configurations will be on the overcrossing itself, will be between Almanor and 11th. there will be transitions, of course, to get them back onto the city network, but this project is not looking at changing the lane configurations or quantities of lanes on the existing sections of Mary or other streets that it will connect to.
Yes, that's correct. There will not be any widening or changes to the existing configuration of Mary Avenue.
And yes, it is 4 lanes up to Almanor.
The road diet has improved the traffic in our residential area.
That's good to know. Thank you. I'm glad you can share that. I'm assuming that means the residential portion of Mary that's to the south end, closest to Homestead. I believe that's the neighborhood where we had a road diet done a number of years ago.
Yes, that's correct.
No, I see a question. Am I the, there is a number of other folks on here. I know you guys can't see each other, but we are, encouraging everyone to ask questions. So please let us know, if there are specific environmental concerns, the list of items that Alex showed earlier. Was there anything on there? And maybe Alex, could you go back to that list and see, is there anything on there that you have specific concerns about or you want to know more about? How are we going to study that? Are there things that you feel like maybe aren't on this list and should be? Because this is the list right now. This is the scope of the EIR, all the environmental issues that it will analyze and document.
Yeah, we have another question now. Will the scope of the EIR include assumptions about gas versus electric vehicles?
So yes and no. It depends on the issue area. As far as like overall vehicles traveling in terms of number of vehicles, it does not make a distinction between gas versus electric. In terms of like air quality analysis, it's hard to do that because it's hard to really know what the number is. So generally, to provide a conservative analysis, we assume that the cars will all be gas cars, so that when you look at it and you prepare for any mitigation that's required, you're taking the worst case scenario, which would assume all gas cars.
Alex, as we are kind of reaching the end here and we haven't had a question for a minute, maybe you could share the slide again on how they can submit comment.
Sure.
So yes, that's my contact information, my mailing address at City Hall, my phone number at City Hall, and even though we are working virtually part of the time, I do get my voicemails regularly. I do have a remote access to my phone and my email. I'm always on my email, so please send me notes or give me a call or send me a letter.
Awesome. Thanks, Angela. Quick other question that's come in. How do these options foster the improvement of public transportation?
Sure. So let me go to so this option, this is the proposed project. This option includes, if high occupancy vehicles, including public transportation, would be allowed to, use this. In fact, public transportation would be permitted on any of the options that are proposed that would allow automobiles. So you could do that. Additionally, this goes, as Angela mentioned in the very beginning, that it goes over the light rail. And the reason that the cycle track was placed on this side of the overcrossing was so that in the future, if there was ever an opportunity to connect with like a stairway or elevator to the light rail station, that that would be feasible, and people riding bikes or walking would not have to cross the street in order to access that light rail station. So it was designed with that in mind. And also it does bring people from the south side of the freeways. It does bring them over to the north and the I'm going to move over to the aerial real quick. It does bring people here over to this side where they can access the light rail from right here along Moffett Park Drive.
So thank you, Alex. We have a couple of other questions that have come in. In a previous presentation, a representative of Moffett Park had concerns about emergency evacuations of the Moffett Park area triangle. Will that be included for the project and each alternative? Yeah,
so emergency vehicles will be allowed to use the Mary Avenue Overcrossing. One of the objectives of proposing this project is to provide another access point from the Moffett Park area to relieve, hopefully relieve congestion and some of the burden that is now being carried by the two interchanges on Matilda at 101 and 237. So that is absolutely an objective of the project, is to improve all access, including emergency access from the Moffett Park area.
Great. Question about VTA. Is VTA part of this plan, or have they been part of this plan?
In terms of part of the plan, I'm not, they're not specifically involved in that, the design or thing, but the city has been in consultation with VTA. We met with them not too long ago to discuss, to make sure that we have the appropriate clearance over their station right here, and make sure that the overcrossing wasn't going to conflict with any of their overhead wires. They will, in the past, we've had stakeholder groups, and VTA has been included as part of that outreach, and they will definitely be included. They're included in the notice for this scoping meeting and the NOP, and they'll definitely be included in notices for the draft EIR and future hearings and notices, and we fully expect that they will review and comment the traffic and transportation analysis that's prepared for the EIR.
All right, I don't see any other questions coming in. I guess we can give it just one more minute and then say goodbye for the evening.
Angela, do you have any final words or closing remarks you'd like to add?
No, I think I just want to say thank you to everybody that took time out of their evening to be with us tonight and hear about the project. And thank you for all the really good questions. Maybe before we wrap up here, if you want to take a quick picture or screenshot of this so that you have the information. But if you don't, or you delete it or something on accident, again, like Alex said earlier, you just go to the city's website and there's a search button at the top. Just look for Mary Avenue Overcrossing. It comes right up. The page comes right up. My contact info is there again. The notify me button is there, and we will be sending email blasts every time there's an opportunity for public interaction, feedback needed, another meeting such as this one. If we're going to a commission or council, that's the way to stay up to date on the project and all of the events surrounding the project. And the web page we keep updated pretty regularly, so check that. If you're wondering, I haven't heard from them in a while. What's going on? It'll be up there as well. So and always any time along the process, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to hear your feedback. That's why we're here. And thank you to Alex, Jordan, Addie, the team for everything here this evening. And I think with that, I don't see any other questions, but happy to answer them in the future. We can go ahead and wrap up and let everyone have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you.